All right, so here we go. When you're given this type of problem, in standard form, we know standard form has a couple different things that you automatically know just by looking at it. Well, what things do we know? Well, we know the y-intercept. The y-intercept has to be 0, 7, so it has to be at y of 7. We know that because the a value is positive, so since a is positive in this case, right, a is 1, it has to open up. And since it goes up, we know the vertex point would have to be the lowest point or would be a minimum. So those are things that you know automatically just by looking at this type of problem. All right, now there's a couple things that you need to actually solve for, right? So the very first thing we have to solve for is the axis of symmetry. Well, how do we find the axis of symmetry? That's when we use the only formula that we have in this unit is negative b divided by 2a. And we know that here a is 1, b is negative 6, and c is 7. All right? So that tells me that I'm going to have a negative of negative 6 divided by 2 times 1, or 6 divided by 2, and so x would be 3. And so I know that my axis of symmetry is x equals 3, or would be right there at the line x equals 3. That would be my line there. All right, that also tells me that my vertex, the x value, has to be 3. Okay, once we know that the x value is 3 for the vertex, I can just plug in and see what does that give me. Well, that would say that's 3 squared minus 6 times 3 plus 7. Well, 3 squared is 9 minus 18 plus 7. Now, here's where I also want to make sure that you completely understand. Well, this A group and this B group is always going to be twice as big as A group and opposite signs when you are at the axis of symmetry. So when you were plugging this in, if you did this right, the B group will always be twice as big as the A group and opposite signs. So like 18 is twice as big as 9, right? So let's see, what do we get here? Then that would give me negative 9 plus 7. So that would say that my y is negative 2. So that tells me that my vertex has to be at 3, negative 2. Okay, so I can plot that point. So 3, negative 2. You notice my vertex is on the axis of symmetry line, or the y value lies on that line. So now all I got to do is just use the pattern if I want. Well, since it's a 1, we're going to use the 1, 3, 5, right? So over 1, up 1, over 1, up 3, 1, 2, 3. And notice in this case it is by halves, so I'm still going over 1 value, so from 3 to 4. And from negative 2 to negative 1 is over 1, up 1, over 1 value, up 3, even though that's a lot of lines there, but each one is only worth a half. Okay, so that gives me those points, and then the same on the other side, right? So I know I have the same on the other side of this line, and there's my graph there. Looks like that guy. What a beaut, right? And now the x-intercepts, I can look and see, well, that one goes right around there, and that one's right around there. So at this point, this point looks like it's about 1.5, so I'm going to say 1.5. And this line looks like it's not quite at 4.5, so let's do 4.25. And there we go. There's all the information that we need. Okay, what I'd like for you to do now is try and see if you can fill out all of this information. So at this point, pause it, right? See if you can complete all these as if it was a worksheet. So pause and do this just like it was a quiz, just like it was a worksheet, and see if you actually get what the answer is. Okay, so pause it, try to work it out. All right, so there's where we get y-intercept of 0, 11. X-intercept should have been, so we're looking at these two values here, right? So it looks like for in this case, negative 2.5, negative 1.2, axis of symmetry up here. So negative 12 divided by 6 gives me negative 2. Plug in negative 2, and we get 3 times 4 minus 24 plus 11. 12 minus 24 plus 11 gives me negative 12 plus 11 equals negative 1. So there we go for that. That tells me, that gives me my vertex. From my vertex, negative 2, negative 1, I can go over 1 and up 3, over 1 and up 9, right? So over 3, so up 3, over 9. Because why? We have to multiply our pattern 1, 3, 5 by 3. So that would be 3, 9, 15 would be the pattern. Okay, and there we go. That's all she wrote. Okay, the much easier variety, when it is actually in vertex form, we know vertex form is ax minus h squared plus k. So there's a couple things that you should automatically know. We know our axis of symmetry is got to be at x equals 3. And so that would tell me that my vertex is at 3, in this case, 3, negative 3. Right? Because A is positive, I know it opens up, and since it opens up, it has to be a minimum point. So I could go ahead and actually plot. This has got to be at 3, negative 3. There's that. We know instead of being 1, 3, 5, so instead of being our standard 1, 3, 5 pattern, it's got to be multiplied by 2, so it'd be 2, 6, 10. So over 1, up 2, over 1, up 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And there we go. There is all she wrote for any of that, and there's all of that. There's drew that line terribly, but what does that tell me? That tells me that I know that my x-intercept has got to be a little bit less than 2, so I'm going to say negative. I'm going to say 1.8, and a little bit more than 4, so let's say 4.2. What is my y-intercept? Well, y-intercept is going to be somewhere way up here, right? We know y-intercept occurs when x is equal to 0. So the y-intercept always happens when x is 0. So what happens if I put in 0 here? Let's just see. That would be 2 times negative 3 squared minus 3. Well, that would be 2 times 9 minus 3, or 18 minus 3. And that would tell me that my y-intercept occurs at 0 and 15. All right, let's see. Does that make sense? Well, we know if I'm doing the, right, 2, 6, 10, well, I would have to go over 1 and up 10. So from 5 and 10 more would put me at, yes, 15. All right, that is it. Hope this helps get you ready for your quiz. Good luck tomorrow.